What happens when a beloved music legend walks into what should be a light-hearted morning interview, only to face a line of questioning so cruel, so condescending, that he has no choice but to walk off live television? In just 34 seconds, one comment from host Allison Hammond would turn a cheerful chat into national chaos. Sir Cliff Richard had arrived on this morning expecting an easy conversation. Questions about his new album, a few laughs, maybe a fond story from his 6 decades in music. It was meant to be simple, comfortable, routine. But from the moment he sat down, something felt off. Allison greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Cliff, thanks for joining us," she said brightly. "It's lovely to be here," Cliff replied, ever the gentleman. Then came the question that changed the tone entirely. "So, new album," Allison began, leaning back with a smirk. "At your age, do you ever think maybe it's time to let the younger artists have their moment?" The words hit like a slap. Cliff blinked, thrown off for the first time in years. "I'm sorry?" he asked, polite but firm. "I mean," Allison continued, waving a dismissive hand, "you've had an incredible career. Truly. But don't you think the industry's kind of moved on? Your sound is, well, retro." She said retro like it was an infection. Cliff straightened slightly. "I think there's always room for all kinds of music. My fans enjoy what I do. That's what matters to me." "Your fans," Allison echoed, her tone sharp with mockery. "They're all a bit older, aren't they? Properly old. Don't you worry that once that generation is gone, your music disappears with them." The studio went silent. Even the camera crew froze. Cliff took a slow breath. "Allison, I'm not sure what you're getting at," he said evenly. "I came here to talk about my music, not to be insulted." "Insulted?" Allison laughed, a brittle cutting sound. "Come on, Cliff. You've been doing this, 60, 70 years? At some point, don't you just want to retire and let someone else shine?" "I love what I do," Cliff replied, his voice steady but colder now. "And I'll keep doing it as long as I choose. I don't need your permission for that." "Touchy," Allison said with a smirk. "I hit a nerve, didn't I?" That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was an ambush. "You know what I think?" Allison went on, leaning in. "People like you can't accept that the world's moved on. You're stuck in the past, making music for people who are stuck there too. It's sad, really." The word sad hung in the air like poison. Cliff's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened against the armrest. He was still trying desperately to stay composed. "Allison," he said slowly, "I came here in good faith to share my new music with your viewers, not to be disrespected." "Disrespected?" She rolled her eyes. "You're so sensitive. I'm just asking questions. That's what journalists do." "Journalists ask questions with respect," Cliff shot back. "What you're doing is just rude." "Huh?" Allison's tone sharpened. "How about showing up here and taking airtime from artists people actually care about? Someone relevant?" The words were like daggers. Even the crew looked horrified. Millions were watching. Live. Cliff stood up slowly, calmly. He unclipped his microphone, placed it neatly on the sofa, and said, "I'm leaving. I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Come on, don't be dramatic," Allison said quickly, her voice wobbling now. "Sit down." "No," Cliff replied. "I've been in this business a long time. I've dealt with tough questions, but never with such blatant disrespect." He gave one final look, dignified, disappointed, and utterly resolute. "Good luck with your show," he said quietly, and with that, Sir Cliff Richard walked off set, leaving behind stunned silence, a shaken host, and a moment that would echo through every newsroom in Britain by lunchtime. Cliff looked straight at her, his gaze calm but unflinching. "You invited me here," he said quietly. "I came in good faith, and from the moment I sat down, You've done nothing but try to tear me down." "Why? What did I ever do to you?" Allison opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The confidence that had fueled her earlier barbs seemed to drain away under the weight of his composure. "I'll tell you what I think," Cliff continued, his tone low, measured, each word deliberate. "I think you're threatened. You see someone who's had a long, successful career, and it bothers you. Maybe because you're worried about your own relevance. Maybe because you're afraid that one day someone will say to you the very same things you've just said to me." "That's ridiculous," Allison stammered, her voice suddenly small. "Is it?" Cliff asked softly. He reached for his jacket, folding it over his arm with the same care he brought to everything he did. "You can think whatever you want about my music. Call it old-fashioned. Call it irrelevant. That's your opinion. But you don't get to sit there and tell me I don't matter. You don't get to tell me that my fans don't matter. Because they do. They matter to me. And I matter to them. That means something. Something you clearly don't understand." The studio fell into absolute silence. Even the faint hum of the cameras seemed to vanish. Allison sat motionless, pale and speechless. "I'm going to leave now," Cliff said after a pause. "And I'm going to go make music for the people who want to hear it. The people who value it. Who believe that passion and art don't come with an expiration date." He started toward the edge of the set, then stopped. Turning back, he looked at her one last time. "You know, Allison," he said quietly, "one day you'll be older too. And when that day comes, I hope someone shows you more kindness than you've shown me today." And with that, Sir Cliff Richard walked off set. The cameras kept rolling, not because anyone told them to, but because no one could move. Allison sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, in a trembling voice, she managed, We're going to take a quick break." But it was far too late. The moment had already gone viral. Within minutes, social media was ablaze. Viewers weren't outraged at Cliff. They were outraged for him, because he hadn't shouted. He hadn't lashed out. He hadn't thrown a single insult. He'd simply drawn a line, with grace, composure, and quiet dignity. That was strength. That was class. Meanwhile, Allison Hammond had revealed exactly what Cliff had said. A deep insecurity masked as confidence. Her attempt to humiliate him had backfired spectacularly. When the show returned from commercial, she tried to laugh it off. "Well, that was certainly unexpected," she said with a forced chuckle. "Cliff Richard, feeling a little sensitive this morning, it seems." But nobody was laughing. Not the viewers at home, not the producers in the control room, not even her own crew, who could barely look at her. Because everyone could see what had really happened. That wasn't journalism. It wasn't even entertainment. It was cruelty, broadcast live. And Cliff Richard had met it not with anger, but with grace. The interview that began as a routine morning chat had transformed into something much bigger. A defining moment that showed the true character of both people on that sofa. Cliff Richard, the consummate professional, who carried himself with respect even when disrespected, and Allison Hammond, a host who let ego and insecurity turn a simple conversation into a televised humiliation. The saddest part was how needless it all was. Cliff hadn't come in defensive or difficult. He'd been open, kind, and ready to connect. And Allison had taken that goodwill and crushed it beneath her own insecurity. Her question, "Do you ever think it's time to let the younger artists have their moment?" had exposed more about her than about him. It revealed a mindset that saw success as something to hoard, not share. A worldview where aging meant fading, and respect was conditional. Cliff had seen it instantly. He'd met people like her before, the ones who smiled while sharpening the knife. But this time he refused to let it slide. When he stood up and removed that microphone, he wasn't just defending himself. He was standing up for everyone who'd ever been told they were too old, too irrelevant, or past their prime. And as the clip spread across the internet, one line from the confrontation stood out above all the rest. "One day you'll be older too. I just hope someone treats you with more kindness than you showed me today." It wasn't just a mic drop. It was a masterclass in dignity. But what Allison Hammond never seemed to understand, what she couldn't understand, was that music doesn't age. Good music is timeless. It doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't matter whether a song was written yesterday or half a century ago. If it moves people, if it stirs emotion, if it brings comfort or joy, then it matters. Cliff Richard understood that. His fans understood that. But Allison, in her desperate attempt to seem sharp and relevant, had missed the entire point. Her words. How about turning up here? Taking airtime that could go to someone relevant, someone people actually care about, were the moment everything changed. The mask slipped. The friendly TV persona vanished. And what was left was something raw and mean-spirited. It was no longer about journalism or curiosity or even entertainment. It was about ego. Pure, simple ego. She wanted to be the star. She wanted the moment to be about her. And when Cliff Richard, gracious, beloved, undeniably accomplished, sat across from her, she felt small. So she tried to make him small instead. But it backfired, spectacularly, because Cliff didn't shrink. He didn't lash out. He didn't plead to stay. He simply recognized his worth, stood up and walked away. "I've been in this business a very long time, Allison," he'd said. "I've faced tough interviews, difficult questions, challenging journalists, but I have never been treated with such blatant disrespect." Those words hit harder than any outburst ever could, because they carried truth. Cliff Richard had sat in thousands of interviews across decades of fame. He had been challenged before, sometimes harshly, but always with a baseline of respect. Always with the understanding that he was a human being who had earned the right to be treated with dignity. Allison stripped that away, and in doing so, she revealed far more about herself than she realized. "I think you're threatened," Cliff had said. "You see someone who's had a long, successful career, and it bothers you." The look on her face said it all. The smirk evaporated, the confidence drained. For a brief moment, the mask cracked, and what showed underneath wasn't power. It was fear. Because he was right. She was threatened by his success, by his longevity, by the effortless respect he commanded just by being himself. Instead of learning from him, instead of celebrating him, she'd tried to tear him down. "Maybe you're worried about your own relevance," Cliff went on. "Maybe you're scared that one day someone will say the same things to you that you've just said to me." That was the truth she didn't want to face. The mirror she didn't want held up, because one day she would be older too. One day someone younger, sharper, more in touch would sit across from her and ask if it wasn't time to step aside. And when that moment came, she would remember this one, this cruel, needless moment, and understand what it felt like. "You don't get to tell me I don't matter," Cliff said. "You don't get to tell me my fans don't matter. They matter to me, and I matter to them." That was the heart of it, the truth no one could twist or take away. Cliff Richard mattered. Not because of his chart positions or awards, though he had plenty, but because his music had meant something to people. It had carried them through heartbreaks and triumphs, weddings and funerals, decades of living. He had given something real. And Allison, sitting there in her chair, armed with sarcasm and ego, had given them nothing but ugliness. "One day you'll be older too," Cliff said softly. "And I hope someone treats you with more kindness than you've shown me today." There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, just quiet compassion. From a man who had every reason to be furious. That was grace. That was character. That was the difference between someone with substance and someone just performing for the camera. When Cliff walked off that set, he didn't just leave behind chaos. He left behind a lesson. A reminder that you don't have to accept disrespect. That dignity is louder than outrage. That walking away can be the most powerful statement of all. Allison tried to spin it afterward. Tried to frame Cliff as difficult, oversensitive, humorless. But no one believed her, because everyone had seen it with their own eyes. They'd seen the cruelty. They'd seen the mockery. They'd seen how a man who had given the world decades of joy was treated like a punchline, and how he refused to let it define him. The interview was supposed to last 15 minutes. It didn't even make it past 5. 5 minutes that ended Allison Hammond's credibility. 5 minutes that elevated Cliff Richard's legacy even higher. Because in the end, people don't remember chart numbers or sound bites. They remember how you made them feel. And in that studio in front of millions, Cliff Richard reminded the world what true humanity, humility, and strength really look like. Allison Hammond reminded them of something else. What happens when ego replaces empathy, and when cruelty tries, and fails, to silence grace. But the truth is, it never had to end that way. The entire thing, the tension, the walkout, the public backlash, could have been avoided if Allison had simply remembered what her job was. To listen, to engage, to respect. All she had to do was talk to him like a person, not a prop. Ask questions. Show appreciation. Let a legend share his story. That's all it would have taken. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't resist the temptation to make a moment, to push too far, to turn what should have been a celebration into a spectacle. She wanted to trend, not to talk, to shock, not to understand. And she got her viral moment. Just not the kind she wanted. In 5 excruciating minutes, she managed to show the world exactly what happens when ego replaces empathy, when the need for relevance outweighs the basic decency of treating a guest with respect. She thought she was putting Cliff Richard in his place. Instead, she put herself in hers. Cliff, on the other hand, did what legends do. He rose above it. He didn't shout. He didn't retaliate. He didn't try to win the argument. He just stood up, looked her in the eye, and chose dignity. That simple act of walking away with calm conviction carried more power than anything he could have said. Because in that moment, he reminded everyone watching that true strength isn't loud. It's steady. It's knowing your worth when someone tries to strip it away. It's refusing to let someone else's insecurity define you. Cliff Richard didn't just defend his legacy that morning. He defined it. He showed that greatness isn't about the hits or the headlines. It's about character. It's about how you behave when someone tries to humiliate you in front of millions, and you still respond with grace. It's about choosing integrity when it would be easier to retaliate. Meanwhile, Allison sat in the ruins of her own creation. The audience had seen everything. The smirk, the digs, the moment she went too far. And they didn't side with her. They sided with the man who kept his composure, who walked out without bitterness, who refused to let cruelty win. That's the part she didn't understand. Fame fades, trends vanish, but character, that lasts. Cliff Richard proved that in those 5 unforgettable minutes. And Allison Hammond learned, the hard way, that respect isn't something you take, it's something you give. He won not by fighting, not by arguing, not by stooping to her level, but by simply recognizing that he deserved better and acting on it. That is the real story here. Not the drama, not the confrontation, but the quiet power of self-respect. Because in the end, cruelty always backfires. Trying to look strong by tearing someone else down always exposes weakness. Real strength is calm, patient, and kind. Cliff Richard earned his respect over decades of grace and gratitude. Allison Hammond lost hers in 34 seconds of arrogance. And that, more than anything, is the lesson worth remembering.